YouTube as well.
No stress.
So hi, welcome to Career Curry officially
Thank
once,
you.
and it's lovely to meet you second time in the row after the Global Young Leaders Conclave as well. And
Oh,
it was
yes,
good to
of
see
course.
you through the struggling time of the airport and stuff traveling all across.
Oh,
So
my God.
officially, how much I know about you, Avanti. So let me introduce everyone to you. Avanti is a great classical Indian musician with pep to it, to the pop culture as well, if I am right.
Thank
And also, you did your dual degree from Harvard and as well as Barclays Music School. So this is so amazing sometimes to see that going to such a big school and then you have the diversity all over, you understand so much, and then again coming back to the roots, coming back to Indian classical music and bringing the pop culture and the mixture of it. How does this eventually flew, or how was the journey altogether, Avanti, for you? And what actually made you come back was because I know that you have been learning music since your childhood,
you. Yes.
but then again, sometimes it's a very difficult step to take altogether coming from such a great university back to things again.
No, totally. Firstly, thank you for the kind introduction and hello to everybody who's watching live or to everybody who might be listening as well. I, for me, a lot of my life has happened in twos. Um, what I mean by that is I've lived exactly half my life at this point between the US and India. I was born in the US, lived there till I was about 9, then I moved to India, back to the US, and I've always been back and forth. Similarly, I've always had dual interests in things. Two things I very deeply and passionately care about are music and the arts, and global health and social impact. So at university, I studied psychology and global health, but music, as you mentioned, has always been a part of my life. I've been learning from a very young age, and even though I trained in Indian classical and a few other forms, I never considered that it could be a potential career, or at least one aspect of my career, until I decided to not think of one's career. Often, too often, especially in our culture, we think of our education as a stepping stone, or we think of everything as being linear, right? Which is why there's often a promotion of fields such as becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, because those are more linear paths, right? You study medicine, you become a doctor. You study engineering, you become an engineer. But that's not necessarily the case, right? And if that's something you enjoy, please go do it. But if something you don't enjoy, you don't have to feel limited to just a linear path because it is traditionally stable. I wanted to figure out a way for myself to marry the two worlds, and I thought for the longest time that that would involve me doing something in the global health space and potentially combining that with music or the arts. For example, say working with or for the UN or at a company and figuring out how to combine media and art with that strategy. But along the way, when I started performing more and more and started writing original music, and as you said, marrying even those two worlds, right, the pop world and kind of my classical roots, I realized that you can marry your loves for and your passions and your purposes in so many different ways. So today I'm really grateful that it's in the form of me being a full-time artist, content creator, and an entrepreneur, and being able to bring those two things, which is why a lot of my music is about whether it is things related to social impact or just related to matters of the heart, or a lot of the things that I talk about through other forms of content are around things like education or mental health or sex education, or a lot of things we often don't talk about as openly in society, because I know that I wished I had somebody who did that. So if in some way that helps, that's kind of the piece of the journey.
Avanti, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah, I think you were on mute.
Uh, can you hear me now? Am I
Yes.
audible?
Yes.
Oh, great. That actually says so much because we so much have books and this and that about so many things, but then eventually we lose that concept of not having to talk about a lot of things, especially when you said that it is not always the linear path that you always have to go ahead and take your career down, especially music. I think the other time I met a IAS also who gave up his entire career to just come back to the roots and start being a musician back in Indian classical music. And that's so inspiring that sometimes when you don't love things, you come back and come to your grassroots and then you want to really develop them. And this also, what I have seen, as you also, you might be able to throw some light in that area. But isn't it difficult that you have an opportunity out there for yourself, which can bring you great bread and butter, which could be a university like Harvard for sure? And how does the experience differ altogether, and how do you think this should be the entire thought process to it?
Yeah, I mean, of course. So many of my classmates, right, immediately after graduating are going into jobs that potentially are paying higher, at least in the short term. Or, वो कहते हैं ना that you get that chapa so that you can get a higher
हाँ,
job, right?
ट्रू। बस स्टैम्प तो आजकल बहुत ज़रूरी है। इनफैक्ट
हाँ.
आई थिंक मोस्ट ऑफ द यूथ एक बहुत क्लियर माइंडसेट के साथ आता है। हम इतने सारे यंगस्टर्स को मिलते हैं, दे ऑल से यार मेरे को ना कुछ नहीं करना, तो एक सर्टिफिकेट दे दो,
हाँ, but
करना है उनको सर्टिफिकेट दे दो।
But वो in certificate से छापा से you can have all of these things, but it's also what you make of your experience, right? You can go to the best universities in the world and just not really make the best of your experience, or you can go to a not so well known place and you can really, really excel and really succeed. So a lot of it is based upon you. In terms of not going into a traditional job afterward, it was something that was a very conscious choice. And of course, there were so many people, my parents included, and the whole log kya kahenge situation, which was like, Arey, Harvard gayi ho, music kar rahi hai."
रिश्तेदार।
Huh, rishtedar, well wishers. And you know what? I think I'm truly of the belief that you shouldn't be chasing a job, right? In 2015, the statistic in the American population was that the average American changes their jobs 8 times in their lifetime. And that's in 2015, that's almost 7 years ago. And now globally, that's true, right? We're always reinventing constantly. The example you gave of the IAS officer, I wouldn't say that he gave up his career. He just switched his paths, right? Or he just, expanded his horizons. And I think there's so much possibility, and you have to be smart about it, of course, when you decide to do something that's non-traditional. You have to figure out ways to sustain yourself. But a lot of that takes a lot of research and a lot of really hard work and understanding the nuances, because even if you're in a creative field, whether it's music or anything else, right, content or marketing or arts or whatever it might be, it's still a business at the end of the day, right? And you have to treat it like one. If anything, it's honestly like running a startup, where the difference is that you are also the brand and the product. So you have to actually end up doing everything, right? For example, I could say to you, hey, this ring is the best ring in the world, and I can sell it to you. But I can't exactly come to you and say, hey, I'm the best singer in the world, because A, that's not true. And B, there's a little bit more of a nuance, right? So you have to understand all of these things. In fact, when I decided that I wanted to do this full time, I made a business plan for myself, of course, for my parents and for other folks, and just explained to them that, hey, if X path doesn't work out, there's so many other opportunities in this space. And today, knock on wood, I'm grateful. I'm not concerned about money, because I was very clear that I knew if I was doing something that I loved, the money would come. And it took a while, right? And it took a while to develop it and grow it. But some of these industries are what I like to call pipe industries. So if you do a more traditional job, it's more like a ladder industry, where you get promoted, then you get the next increment, you get whatever. Whereas in some creative industries, either you get nothing or you get a lot, right? And there's always this up and down slide. So you have to be smart. For example, you have to diversify your sources of income. When the pandemic hit, a huge way in which musicians make money is by performing live. और आजकल live performance कर ही नहीं सकते हैं, right? We can do some Zoom shows and things, but it's not the same. So that's when I diversified into other content. We're working on a bunch of other projects, and you have to understand how to run it like a business as well. So whatever it is you're interested in, it doesn't matter. You can be interested in video games. Today, there are people who are monetizing that and making an incredible living off of it. And you also have to prioritize कि आपके मन में success का मतलब क्या है, right? For some people, success means money. For some people, success means satisfaction and happiness. For others, it means impact. Once you know what success means for you, then you will chase that, right? And then you won't let what other people say affect you. Because of course there will always be people who say, I had so many people who were like, agar music hi karna tha to why did you go to Harvard, right? Or why are you doing this because you went here? And because people like to put us in boxes. They don't understand that we are living, breathing, growing humans, and we have the capacity to do whatever we'd like. Also, my education, did not go to waste by any means. I am applying everything that I've learned in terms of whether it was in the
That
field.
literally would have been my next question to
Oh,
you.
really?
That because yeah, because a lot of people think that यार मैंने पढ़ लिया ना science, and I still feel that I was a science student back in my age,
I was
and
as well, yeah.
I still apply those things in and around me.
100.
Uh,
There's no learning that's wasted, right? Because you're always learning in life, and also the kinds of jobs that exist today didn't exist 10 years ago. So I can
very true.
understand if they're, generationally, if say parents aren't as supportive, because उनको समझ ही नहीं आता है कि क्या
Correct.
option है, right? Like think about it. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if somebody said, "Oh my God, I want to do a job where I sit in front of my computer all day and type in letters and I make a lot of money," people were like, "Tum pagal ho, what is that today? That's a programmer. That's a coder, right?"
Very true. Very
And
true.
and today people are like, "Oh, coding kar raha hai mera bacha, blah blah blah," right?
हाँ, now it White Hat Junior चिंटू भी अब coding करता है, so it's so common now. And
Exactly. So it's only going to be a matter of time till other industries get that same level of
true.
recognition and respect, through
True,
the
true,
generation.
true. I think a few years down the line, nobody knew that word called freelancing also. Now
Yeah,
it's so much in hype. Nobody knew content writing, content creation. And you being a content creator, I think could more relate to that industry as well.
totally.
That so much of difficult task, and you might be the right person actually envisaging the same thing about content. But how does this entire thing relate to each other? How does this content thing even works?
It's a fascinating space, right? This idea of the creator economy. Today, no matter what industry you're in, even let's say you're a researcher, right? And you're studying stem cell research, you will interface with content at some point in your life, whether that is in
Great.
the form of how you literally present the research, whether that is in the form of how that is communicated to the public, right? Within your scientific journals, for example, there might be a certain way in which you have gone through the path of academia, but if you want to communicate that to the public, it's being done through content, right? Because that's what, and you have to understand that as we evolve, the mediums are going to change. Way back when radio used to be the biggest piece, now radio is not as much. Then it was TV, newspapers. Today, most young folks are so used to consuming content and having everything at their fingertips that that's where they're doing it, right? And so for me, I realized if I want to talk about these things, if I want to talk about mental health, sex education, talk about menstruation, all of these things, one approach is I could, write research papers about them, which is incredibly important. And there are so many people, if you don't have that credibility in that research, then you can't, continue and make that progress. But I knew that that wasn't the path for me because I cared so much about the arts and I wanted to marry the two. And so a lot of what I learned, right, and a lot of what I've had to figure out how to apply those concepts and how to make them engaging and consumable, right? I might have a lot of knowledge about these things because of what I've studied or my experience in life, but a 15-year-old today is not going to care, right? Unless it's
Very
in
true.
a way that's engaging to them and that feels both educational and fun and informative and engaging and entertaining. It's very difficult, right? And also, a lot of people still have respect for actors, right? An actor has to come onto a set, and there's so many different people doing different things. There's a producer, there's an editor, there's a writer, there's a makeup artist. There's like all of these different things that are, going into it. There's somebody filming. When you're a creator, you're doing everything yourself, right? And so you have to wear
Agree.
all the hats, and it's very fascinating. I mean, and as with any industry, there might be some stuff that is just not for you, right? So you may not enjoy certain types of things, and that's okay. But the point is there's so much opportunity today and there's so much diversity today. And even if you have no interest in being a content creator or being associated with it, it's only going to be a part of your life in some way or another, right? Think about what's happening with AR. Think about what's happening with VR. Think about what's happening with Web3 and NFTs and crypto, and the metaverse, right? In some capacity, we are all going to have to interface with it. So having an education and understanding, when I say an education, you can learn by literally being a consumer. And understanding just the role that it plays, whether you want to create it, consume it, or use it as a tool to market and leverage your products.
Very true. Very true. That was so fascinating when you were talking about that. Certainly, no education goes for waste, and absolutely, when we talk about, and this is my understanding because somehow I am also very close to music. I enjoy, and I think there is no one in this world who does not enjoy music, and this is very true. I think somehow music as a career in India, especially, has been super underrated, and
Totally.
somehow I don't know, this is just maybe an external person speaking through, maybe that is super underrated sometimes, especially by the parents.
Yeah,
And second, I also think that music can be such a great experience as a healing also, because you have done your psychology, so you might be a better person to talk about it. So that how all these mental health problems what we are facing right now can be how smoothly we connected to all the musical part of it. And what do you think about all this area? Is there a, because I think you being the NVCH for the talking about mental health all the time, is that something do you think music can also help people in?
100%. To address the first part of what you were saying about music not being as valued, right, in society, there's three reasons for that. One, India doesn't have a fully established music industry that is independent of Bollywood. For many, many years, our music was created for film. So
Very
unless
true.
you're an Arijit or a Lata or a Shreya or whomever you may know, you don't know who the person is. You think of a song as a Katrina Kaif song or a Shah Rukh Khan song,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I can understand
because
from
that face
yeah,
value.
that's the face value. And I can understand from a parental perspective, right? They're like, oh, Bollywood matlab love, sex, dhoka, right? And they associate it with all of these different things. So I can understand that. However, that's changing. There are so many independent artists today, and you can make a living as a musician in so many different ways. It's just going to take time for us to recognize and not categorize it as film and non-film music, but just music for music's sake, right? And it's not like we don't. The fact that BTS is massive in India is a testament to the fact that it doesn't matter the language or the style, you're able to create that. The fact that you have, so many folks are fans of, say, a Justin Bieber or a Taylor Swift, or they know these artists and they know these global icons. It's a huge testament to that fact, right? And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is when you talk about, music within itself, you you don't have to be a certain type of whatever. Like when you think of music, if you associate that with pop or classical or whatever, like with any other industry, there's so much diversity, and you don't have to be a certain type to be able to make a living out of it or to be able to connect with it. There's been a lot of research, and there needs to be much more about the connection between music and mental health. That is part of what I looked at while I was studying. And when it comes to like, for example, spaces in which there has been associations and actual proof. Some examples are Parkinson's is a condition in which you lose your speech, right? Or for folks who have, say, stuttering problems or things of that nature. Um, Actually, music helps with that language fluency, right? And so those are some examples. The beats per minute, which is essentially the how fast or how slow a song is, different types of beats per minute have different impacts on your brains and on the synaptic connections, right? Which is why when some people, you'll see a lot of our cultures and religions will have music at a certain frequency, at a hum, right? Or at a certain kind of beat pattern, because that either connects with your internal heartbeat or that connects with kind of a different source of energy. And it's just vibrations at the end of the day, right? Any form of sound is vibrations, of air particles through the air. And so there's a lot of science behind it as well. And whether it's music therapy or dance therapy or art therapy, those are all just incredible ways in which you can find outlets and catharsis. And it's about finding what works for you. Music has been really healing to me. Um, one of the reasons I care about health so much is I grew up with a lot of physical health conditions. I was born with a heart condition. When I was about 15, I almost lost my eyesight right before my boards, and a lot of different things. And all my grandparents are doctors, so I was around, the industry a lot, and
Yeah.
also had access to care in a way that a lot of people don't. So immediately it was really fascinating experiencing these things and having that access and realizing ki there are so many people in the world who don't. So a lot of my purpose is motivated from how do I bring equity to that, right? And how do we create those opportunities for people? And the things that got me through some of these times was music. Like I remember, for example, with the eyesight situation, it was actually a brain virus that had, demyelinated my tissue. What that means in normal person speak is like wires have coding, our neurons have coatings called myelin sheaths, which allow for the synaptic connections to go faster and for us to be able to think and not realize that we are. So if that has been removed, the same way in which if the coating of a wire is removed, it's just slower, right? Or it's more dangerous. So that's what had happened, and as a result, my not only was my eyesight affected, but my and the optic nerve, but my brain was really fuzzy. And I remember coming back from the hospital, and this was right before my boards, and I couldn't remember geography or history or certain things, and it just for somebody whose identity had been predicated कि मैं अच्छी student हूँ, right? I had done other things, but like being a good student was a huge part of my identity. Or I felt like I don't remember anything. It was really tough, and the thing that I did remember, if that makes sense, was music. And so I it just went to show how healing it was for me. And in that moment, I must have been 15, just realizing that music is so much more powerful than I've thought, and it can be not just a medium but also a vehicle to create change.
When I hear this story, I get some chills around because this is so interesting that how in real life also music can actually help you
Really?
come through that zone where you were originally, which is a big example, aap khud. So, and we generally, I think, especially in case of mental health these days, which is a big day topic to talk about, and I think a lot of people don't, and I think that is something sometimes we neglect, that music can be so powerful. Actually, we'll say, oh, why are you listening to music all the time? But that eventually can really help you out,
And,
like I
and
did.
you also provide a voice for your expressions, right? So, for example, we released a song called Suntolo last year. It'll be exactly 1 year this week. Um, and the
Congratulations.
Thank you. And the song, it's about mental health, but it's really about हम यही चाहते हैं that people listen to us free of judgment, right? कोई सुन तो लो. And when we released the song, we did a music video which kind of showed what that's like for different people through society, and we also did a video where we had people sharing their situations and folks kind of with their presences. And then if you just see the comments on those videos, it really warmed my heart that people felt safe enough to share what they've been dealing with in a stranger's platform. But it also made me very sad ki they felt safer doing that on a stranger's platform than in their own homes, you
That's
know.
sad.
We partnered with about 50 mental health organizations across India, and we were able to provide several folks with free or subsidized therapy through these partnerships. And we do a lot of sessions, every month on our Discord with licensed professionals, because there's so many people who don't have access to the resources, or even if they can access them, उनके घरों में there's still the stigma कि
बात नहीं कर सकते.
बात नहीं कर
So I correct, because I totally remember a student of mine, and she was going through something through mental health, and she could not speak at home. The company she was working with, because they were paying for it. So
Yeah.
once she left, they took out the doctor for her. So there was no doctor, and she wanted to have the same doctor she was getting treated or clinically helped with, and she wanted to go back to the same doctor, but the company's policy did not allow. And that was so ridiculous. I thought that why would the company do that also? Like they always, whether an employee or not, irrespective, I think कम से कम इतना humane nature होना चाहिए. अगर if that doctor is not also available, I think you can be that can be managed. That is not such a big issue. but
Or
then unfortunately she had to quit, and it was like,
I'm sorry. No, it's hard when you hear stories like that. But the thing is, when a lot of people think of mental health, they associate mental health with कि कुछ problem या दिक्कत है.
हाँ दिमाग खराब हो चुका है, इंडिया में तो पागल
हाँ,
कहते
पागल
हैं,
खाना
कह रहे हैं
बोलते
हाँ
हैं.
पागल है.
Mental health, we every single person deals with their mental health on a daily basis, right?
I
Whether
do.
in a positive light or whether it's in a not so great light. When we think of our physical health, we think of, oh, how do we preserve it and how do we grow it, right? So we exercise, we eat right, we do all of these things to maintain our physical health. Similarly, engaging in things that are good for our mental health is important on a daily basis. Whether that's finding an outlet, right? That might be creative or otherwise. Whether that's finding a support system. When things get really stressful, how do you cope, right? It's all about coping and resilience, and that's really what it is. And then, of course, there are some situations in which, whether due to chemical imbalances or massive trauma or triggers or whatever, that it needs medical attention. But either way, you don't have to be to a certain degree of needing help to seek out help, right? That's why you have the diversity. You have something called a psychologist and you have something called a psychiatrist. You have counselors, you have people at every different stage. And seeking out therapy is not something that you only need जब आप बीमार हैं. The same way in which you might go to a gym. Just think of it as a mental gym.
This especially the safe part while we were talking about
Yeah.
that हमें सेफ ही नहीं लगता, हम शेयर ही नहीं कर सकते बिकॉज घर पे अगर हम बोलेंगे तो वी फील जज्ड
Yeah.
कि हमें जज करा जाएगा, एंड दैट इज द एरिया आई थिंक, एंड आई थिंक एवरीबडी जजेस एवरीवन,
Of
isn't
course.
it?
Of course.
And that's kind of human nature, but we sometimes forget that how our appearances, whether it's physically or let me say words wise, हम किसी ना कहीं से जज कर लेते हैं,
Of
but
course.
we eventually forget कि भाई हमारे अंदर भी काफ़ी सारी कमियां हैं, and we lack a lot of things in life which
Yeah.
we probably tend to forget at times. But then that's kind of interesting when you talk in that zone. But coming out of this so deep talks, let me actually ask you. You were mentioning, because you talk about sexual education as well, sex education, which is as important as mental health to be taught. Because I believe कि हम कामा सूत्रा लिख सकते हैं, but we cannot talk about it
Not only
because it's
we are going to be the world's most populated country, so it's clear that people are having sex, but we can't talk about it.
because absolutely it's a big day taboo. Oh, what will you talk about?
Like, yeah.
क्या
Exactly.
बात कर रहे हैं? This is something not happening in this country for sure. You can do it, but you cannot talk about it for sure.
Yeah.
You spoil the entire vibration to it. But I have read, so maybe correct me if I'm wrong out here, that the entire sexual experience. So I was reading something very interesting on Vice, and that was it said tantric sexual experience, and they were talking about music and how your digital, in fact the electronic gadgets जो आप ये आसपास रखते हैं, how to remove from that place, and it's actually a spiritual experience which we tend not to understand about it,
Yeah.
and music can be such an elevating factor to it.
100%. I think, see, when it comes to sex, right, one of the things is we don't talk about it and we don't say it openly. When you're a child, you don't differentiate among parts of your body, right? You are taught that a certain area is your private part, but otherwise, to you, your body is your body, and we associate and attach the shame the older we get. And my big thing is, when it comes to sex, if we don't talk about it, as a result, we don't talk about consent, which is extremely important. We don't talk about consequences. We don't talk about safety. And it's not like there aren't, harmful situations. Children as young as 6 months are getting raped, right? And so the fact is, there are folks who misuse it to such a degree. And when you're young, you are told, "Ki, don't talk to strangers." Are you ever told why? When you're young, if you're feeling uncomfortable around somebody, you and your body knows why somebody's making you uncomfortable, but you can't put it into words, and because there's the shame around it, you don't talk about it, right?
I think we are never taught about the good touch and the bad touch
You're
exactly.
not taught about good touch and bad touch, right? And so your body knows and it reacts to that, but you don't talk about it. And there's so many other reasons why it's important to talk about these things and gain that education. But when it comes to, to the actual act, right? So the Kama Sutra, the fact is, like you mentioned, it's originated out of India. And if you look back to whether it's the, a lot of our ancient texts, there was so much openness about it, right? Honestly, a lot of the shame around it has become because of a misinterpretation of culture, and a lot of it's actually a Western import, which is fascinating, right? We blame the West, or like, oh, West ne ye kiya hai, but actually, this is the reason this has come in is because of that, because of colonialism, and now you're just interpreting it as your sanskar, even though it's actually not what your ancestors believed in to begin with. And this idea of tantric sex, just different people have different associations to what they associate with it. For some people, sex is a casual experience, and that's okay if they know what they're dealing with, right? It's for anything in life. You should know what are the consequences, and are you emotionally ready to deal with them, and physically and otherwise. And if casual is cool for you, that's cool for you. You just have to deal with that, right? If you are somebody who prefers just a monogamous partner and just like a one time or after marriage, that's amazing too. Like it's for each person their own. And for some people, they consider it to be this act of love or this act of devotion almost, right? And that's kind of where this idea of it comes, where it's not just a simple one body part entering another, or people fluids. It's just this idea that its energy is connecting and its soul's connecting, right? And so yes, of course, music can be aids. So many different things. There's a lot of foods that tend to, what people say, kind of boost your libido, things like that. And it's kind of cool if you think about it. It's science if you think about it, right? And so depends on what it means to you, and it's important to understand what it means to you, right? And not be judgmental of other people for their own choices and whatever that might be.
That's so interesting to think the things you have been talking and seeing around you in such a very different aspect altogether. Because I think we neither talk about it, as you said, nor we feel so ashamed because of the societal or peer pressure about it all around. And absolutely, if you're a youngster, वो जैसे ही टीवी पे ऐड आएगा तो parents would be like change कर दो channel या फिर बात मत करो, या it becomes a very odd situation तो आप चुपचाप
more,
बैठ जाते हैं.
the more you do that, the more there's going to be curiosity, right? And the fact is, sex is everywhere. It's on TV, I mean, access to porn, access to everything is there. So if you don't educate them, they're going to be find out from wrong sources. The number of, क्योंकि हमारे community में, audience में, there's a lot of teenagers, the number of people who ask me or us whenever we have, these larger sessions or through videos, questions that I'm just like, I wish you had received this education in school or at home, because your question makes sense and you feel shameful about asking this, because you've just never been talked to about it. Right? It's just like this idea of forbidden anything, right? अगर आप किसी को बोलते हो वो नहीं कर सकते, that's exactly what they want to do, As opposed to, and I mean, so much research has shown that in countries where sex education is mandated in schools, in fact, the rates of teenage pregnancy, the rates of, the average age of when people start to have sex actually is much, much, much higher. Because people are informed and it's just a part of life, not this like, ooh, taboo thing.
This is so much from music to this to that. The entire journey is so different, and I when I realized that music can be everywhere and in anything and everything. Like in fact, a bottle, cap, laptop, everything can have music. But I have a very interesting question for you before we wrap up this also. That if anybody today in India wants to, or anywhere else, whosoever is listening to this, wants to start a career in music,
Yeah.
how would you recommend? Because you have gone through so much, you have seen yourself the challenges and the things might come up. So, what would your piece of advice be? That how could this be converted into a full time career role for them?
If you want to do music as a career, it's 50% craft, 50% business, right? And so when I say craft doesn't mean just making videos. That's wonderful. But craft means really spending time with your voice. Craft means really, वो कला जो कहते हैं, it's really just honing that in. When I talk about the business aspect, that's everything from how do you get yourself discovered, right? So one medium is obviously social media, another medium is word of mouth, another medium is networking and finding people in industries. So for example, in the city you live in, is there a music school or a college? Can you go and attend an event there? Maybe meet a teacher there, get some advice, get some mentorship, right? It's all about finding people who can kind of guide you and be a part of that. Are there musicians in your locality, right? Is there an instrumentalist you know? Is there another singer? Can you collaborate with them? One of the biggest pieces of advice I would have is it should always be collaboration over competition. A lot of
Great.
times I think, that, oh, there's somebody else just like me. There might be another female singer who's in the blah, 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 blah. They're not my competition. Even if all the charts will try to pit us against each other, whatever, they are incredible artists, and the more people that exist like that, the bigger the industry grows. And the bigger the pie becomes for everybody. The more money everybody makes, the more lives people are able to impact, everything. Right? So it's about starting small, figuring out what resources are in your area, in your neighborhood, and you don't have to be in a certain place. Today there's people doing it from their bedroom to wherever. It doesn't really matter. Um, the other thing is, learning all the aspects of the business to start with is really important, because if you do come to a stage where you have a team, say, now we have a team, I still know what goes into every single aspect of the distribution, the creation process I still obviously have to do, right? But the marketing, the networking, the press outreach, the blah, 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 so that nobody can also take you for a ride, you know? Because otherwise, there's so many people, and this happens in life, who will just take advantage of you. So you have to kind of understand what it takes, and really just the main pieces. Figure out and do your research, understand what all the aspects of the business are, and really figure out how to work on your craft. Whether that's you yourself, whether that's you can even find a teacher. YouTube is a great teacher today. There's amazing vocal coaches out there, and you can follow their regimens and at least start to improve that, or whatever your instrument might be. But the world's your oyster. It seems scary because there's no single path to that space and that success. But again, it also starts with how do you define success and then move from there.
So, would you say, if I wish to sum this up, would you say that honing your art itself is first and foremost the most crucial thing, and then would come the understanding the nitty gritties of the business as well, going in and around? Is that
Totally. And accessing resources that you have in and around you, right? Whether that's in the form of the network, whether that's in the form of other artists, collaborations, all of that. That's all going to help in both of those aspects.
if somebody wants to collaborate and think about networking, then Avanti could be the great person you could go to always. Getting some networking, getting some entrepreneurship details, and music as well, isn't it? So one, and I think this is also a very proud moment for the women out there. I think that you have been doing this from scratch, and this gives me so much of effect because I feel so proud saying that our 80% of the organization, rather more than that, 90 I could say, actually comprises of women working with us, and that's so amazing. Sometimes I feel that I am learning so much from them, and it makes me think, oh my God, that this is what you would say empowering women. I think when you start putting reservations to it,
Yeah.
you start making more you're not exactly making them empowered, rather than some restrictions dal dete ho, saying okay yaar theek hai because we need women so we just do it.
नहीं मैं समझ गई आप क्या बोल रहे हैं. That's amazing. And it's all about building equity, right? And for all genders, it's building equity of opportunity. And for too long, if you don't see that representation in different industries, you're going to think that that's not a job for a man or for a woman or for whomever. So it's amazing that there is that support, and clearly based on merit as well, you know?
So, Avanti, thanks a lot for this so much of time, and it was so amazing listening to the entire story and the career journey. I think I'm sure people can take a lot of learnings from this entire process, and I wish you all the best. And when is your next song coming up?
We just released one last week. It's called Tumhari. So if
Ah,
you haven't heard it, please go check it out.
yeah,
It's a beautiful song.
absolutely. I
It's
think we
about
will.
No, please, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, we will also spread a word across for the music. So I think everybody should hear it out, and maybe if this comes as a small piece of content out of this, then absolutely I would love that the music is right there on the ending part of it, so that people can actually hear it out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank
Mm.
you all so much for taking out the time and hanging out on the live and on the Zoom and listening to this also. It means a lot to be here, and I'm really grateful to all of you.
Thanks a lot again, and thank you for sparing so much of time.
Of course, my pleasure.
Lovely talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you
Take
so much.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.